Happy Friday morning, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire NFL DFS podcast, sponsored by WynnBET. We appreciate you jumping in here for Week 8. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always by Ryan Belongia. Did I get it right that time?
Got it right.
It only took 3 weeks. That's pretty good. That's quick learning for me as an old guy here. So that's good. Ryan, before we get into it, how are you doing this week?
Oh, I'm doing good. Thanks. How are you, Scott?
I'm all right. It's been a bit of a long week, but hanging in there. Looking forward to chatting football with you on this Friday morning.
Yeah, me too.
Again, if you wanna join us, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope, and Periscope/Twitter. If you want to make some comments, let us know. Have any questions or anything like that? Do that. If you can please rate and review the podcast when you do listen to us. If you happen to do it on audio or whatever you happen to do it on, that would be fantastic. Also, it goes a long way towards helping us. Help people find the podcast is a really good thing too. So we would greatly appreciate that. Week 8, Ryan. I feel like we're halfway the season. We blinked and here we are. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's flying by. At least we get one extra week this season.
It's true. Everybody complained about the extra week, but like DFS wise, it's just a free extra week. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, for DFS, it's great. But yeah, it's always crazy how fast the NFL season goes.
Yeah, I feel like we wait like the last month takes forever trying to get to games, and all of a sudden we blink and it's week 8. So let's jump in. We have a bigger slate than we did last week. We were past the craziness of the buys last week. We had a lot of buys last week, but we only have 2 teams that buy this week: Baltimore, Oakland. We got 12 games on the main slate that we'll be talking about. 8 early, 4 late. Kind of a nice even breakdown there. We won't be discussing the primetime games. Last night we had your Packers had a nice thrilling win over the Cardinals. If the 49ers were still in the mix, I'd be very grateful for you for finally beating them. But I'm afraid that we're so far back that it may not matter. Dallas and Minnesota, really good game on Sunday night. The Giants and Kansas City on Monday night. Interesting enough, there's only one game on the main slate over 50-point total. They're all 3 primetime games had over 50-point total. Like all the high-scoring games happen to be off the slate. So it's kind of an interesting way that worked out. You don't usually see it that broken down.
Yeah, it really sticks out this week that there aren't a lot of games with high totals. So I don't think there'll be as many fantasy points scored on this slate. We've been seeing big scores in cash games and tournaments. There's been a lot of sort of easy places to go or easy targets, and this week not so much. I think it brings a lot of different things into play. Like you can target some games that might not be as appealing because there probably isn't the opportunity cost that there usually is. So yeah, a lot of ways to attack this slate.
Yeah, I mean, just a general thought on the slate before we really jump into it. I found it really interesting that there's not a lot of high price guys. It's there's 2 running backs on DraftKings over 8,000 because Christian McCaffrey's not playing. He is there, but you can obviously cross him off. There's only two receivers over 8,000 too. I mean, one of them is Cooper Kupp at 9,000, but then Stephon Diggs at 8,100. You go all the way down to 7,700. It's a weird. Some of that is who's off the slate, who's not playing. Obviously, Devante Adams didn't play at all, but Mahomes and Tyreek and Kelsey and Dak and CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. All these names are off the main slate. So when I was working through this slate, it feels to me like it's very much about you've got to nail the mid-range this week. There's not if you want to go it's a little harder to go stars and scrubs because there aren't quite as many stars. You can still do it, but I feel like nailing that mid-range is especially important this week.
Yeah, definitely. There aren't as many stars, and also it doesn't seem like there's as much value as we're used to seeing. There is some at running back, but we don't have the cheap receivers that we've had other weeks. Tight ends a little bit tougher, but there's some options. Quarterback too. There's not as many options as usual. So I agree. I think people are going to be right down the middle for the most part with maybe one spend up, either Kupp or one of those running backs. But yeah, it's going to be about nailing the mid range.
I do too. I mean, it's funny. There's one quarterback over 7,600, so it's not like there's a bunch of. I mean, there's no Mahomes. There's no. They said there's no Dak. There's no Lamar. He's on bye, and then there's no tight end over 6,300, and there's one over 5,400. Like it's a weird week where a lot of the high price guys are off or not on the slate, and it's really interesting from a DFS perspective. There's a ton of options in the mid range. It's hard not to get lost in those options. There's like 10 of a receiver that I like that are all in the middle. Figuring out which ones hit is going to be huge. And that's what we're here to do.
Yeah, definitely. Before we get into it, just real quick about last week, because I think it pertains to things going forward. Basically all the chalk running backs busted last week. The three guys that I played in cash were Henderson, Chuba Hubbard, and Darrell Williams. They all scored under 10 points. Derrick Henry was the popular spend up. He had 16, which is basically a floor game for him.
Yep.
And Fournette was the other one. He did okay because he got into the end zone, but it just shows that these chalky guys, these so-called locks or sure things, I mean, they bust all the time. So I think it illustrates, just don't get married to certain players. Don't have tunnel vision on guys that you just have to play. The NFL's just never like that. And a lot of these plays are very close. So don't worry if you might not be on some of the same chalk as other people, or, you're not really missing out, I guess, is the best way to put it. And then, just for contests, an idea of contests for people to play. I mentioned last week that all my running backs scored under 10 points. I also didn't have Cooper Kupp, but I cashed all the single entry double ups, nice. $100 and below, which blew my mind. I expected to lose everything. If you like playing cash games, those single entry double ups are great value. They're very soft, especially the low stakes tournaments. And then, as far as GPPs go, in the lower stakes, there's some really good 3 max and single entry tournaments that I like to focus on. There's a $5 3 max, an $8 3 max, $15 3 max, and then single entries in that range too. I really think that's the best value when it comes to GPPs. Also, if you like playing the bigger GPPs, the $3 20 max is a really good tournament. Basically, I like to avoid the tournaments where you can max 150 lineups. You can win those, but you're at a disadvantage when you have all of the sharp players entering 150 lineups. So I like to focus on those 3 max tournaments.
That's a good call. I've actually shifted a little bit, and probably some of that's talking to you, but last week I played 4 different levels of single entries, and I didn't play the Millie Maker last week, and I cashed in all the single entries. I didn't look to the cash line in the Millie Maker, but I probably wouldn't have. If I did, it would have been a min cash at most. And I played, I had Henderson, and I forget who my other running back was. My running backs were not very good. I think I had Fournette, but my receivers were really good. I had, I played Rodgers, and I played a little bit of Burrow. The Burrow ones were really good, but I played Rodgers, and he was not huge, but 3 touchdowns, threw one to Devante early. I thought we were going to get a huge Devante blow up game, and we just didn't quite get there, but obviously they both worked, and the receivers are really good. So it was a good week on DraftKings. I struggled on FanDuel, but it's weird how sometimes it works completely that way, even though you're playing similar players. Just sometimes it doesn't click on one or the other. But let's jump into this slate. We've got we mentioned not a ton of high totals. We do have 3 games over 49. I kind of moved the threshold. We usually use a 50 just to get us a couple more games in here, but that's how you have to do it this week. You got to find some games that are not as high, but still high enough where you think they could go back and forth. Tennessee at Indy is 50.5. Derrick Henry versus the world kind of thing always, but Indy's coming along a little bit. Had 30 points in that game against the Niners, even though it was dead pouring and wind and all that. A lot of those Niners defensive backs cannot not commit pass interference, which kind of killed that game. But we got that one. We have the Patriots at the Chargers, a 49-point line there, and then Tampa Bay, New Orleans. Obviously, a really fun game with some big names, but 2 good defenses too. That's 49.5. So you got you have Brady, you have Kamara, but you've got 2 good defenses there too.
Yeah, I think I don't think we're gonna have like a chalky stack or chalky stacks like we've been seeing, but I think people will start with that Titans Colts matchup. It does have the highest total, and it does have players on both sides that people like to roster and that are in good spots. So it just makes sense. I think that's a good option. And then we have a couple bigger favorites again, like we've been seeing recently. The Bills-Dolphins game and the Rams-Texans game, which both the Bills and Rams have implied totals over 30. So you can definitely do some stacks in those games too. can even stack just one side, just the favorite side in those games. But yeah, I know we'll get into it later, but I'm excited to hear which games you're targeting, because, nothing really jumps out is like, oh, I really want, I got to play this game. So I think there's some decisions.
Yeah, it's funny. You talk about those high spread games. We talked about much last week. We had 3 of them. Sometimes you're like, oh my God, I just want to stay away. There's going to be 49-0 at halftime. And other times, and that happened last week. That happened with the Buccaneers, Bears. That happened with the Cardinals, Texans. Like, those games were over early, and we saw teams shut it down a little bit. Kyler Murray still had 3 touchdown passes, but only 260 yards. But then you get the Rams game. The Rams actually were trailing the Lions for a while, and Stafford had to air it out. He had 335 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's just it's hard to know. I mean, Vegas, will give us a pretty good hint of who's going to win, but it's funny. You get that Lions game. They scored. They onside kicked early. They had 2 fake punts. They really went for it and built an early lead. It made it so the Rams were kind of had to throw. It was a great situation if you played Rams, but then you look at Arizona, Texas, and Houston. Houston had a field goal early or whatever it was, but a little lead, but it was over pretty quick. And it's like, well, do I want the passers there? So you got to figure out if you think the other team can hang in just a little bit to make your guys have to throw a ball.
Yeah, definitely. That's always the concern playing those big total games. The Buccaneers blew them out early, but Evans, still had 3 touchdowns. Yeah. Godwin still had a huge game.
Yep.
Fournette still got in the end zone. Godwin was still catching passes in the fourth quarter.
That was weird. I guess it's Tom Brady. And you look at that game, you're like, only 211 passing yards, but 4 touchdowns. You're like, oh, all right, well that worked out then. So it's crazy how that works. But we do have some low totals though. We had a couple really low ones. We have Cincy and the Jets at 43. Obviously, I think the Bengals are favored by 8 in that game on the road, which, we never thought we'd see that happen a couple months ago. Pittsburgh and Cleveland. We talked about Pittsburgh a lot, how they've moved from a team that we like to target to a team that plays some low scoring games. Ben has obviously not looked good. Jacksonville, Seattle, another game you're like, oh, that's going to be interesting. But then, Geno Smith's playing. Jacksonville going into that tough place to play. That over-under is 44. And then I have to admit, it's the start of the year. I never thought my 49ers would be in a game under 40 total, but that's where we are at the moment. Defense is playing pretty well. Aside from the DBs, offense is not playing well. Looked terrible last week. They're at Chicago, at Justin Fields. I wish we were getting a Lance Fields game here, but we're not. We're getting Garoppolo and Fields, as Lance is still a bit banged up, and Kyle Shanahan's more stubborn than I am, which is really hard to accomplish. It's a tough bar to cross. That line is that over-under is 39.5. Any of those 4 games, you're like, I might play some guys here, or those kind of cross-off games for you and move on and get to the next one?
Yeah, I don't think I'll be stacking those games necessarily, but I think there are some plays in them. Your 49ers specifically, it's weird to see a total under 40, but Elijah Mitchell looks pretty good in that spot. There's a big mismatch with the 49ers offensive line versus the Bears defensive line, and the Bears are dealing with some injuries there too. And I also think the 49ers should just end up in having good field position a lot of the game because of, how much the Bears struggle and how tough it's going to be for Fields to move the ball. So
yeah,
I like Mitchell in that game. He's been seeing a very high percentage of the carries, even though
when he's been healthy, he's been the guy. You can mix around a little bit. They use some James Hasty or Jermichael Hasty on third down last week, but when he's in there, he's pretty much the guy. Trey Sermon's an afterthought.
Yeah, and I was impressed with the way he ran against the Colts. Yep. I can see why they're playing him.
Would have been nice if they ran any plays for him in the second, third, and fourth quarters.
Right.
Sorry, I can go an hour just on that game if you want me to, but I don't think anybody wants that.
I understand. I like Mitchell. I think he has upside for a 100-yard rushing game and should have a few chances to get in the end zone. The Cincinnati Jets game, I think there's some plays there. It could be a good game for Joe Mixon if Cincy should have a lead for most of the game, and you'd assume that they sort of just rely on Mixon to close it out in the second half.
While we've gotten to the point where we're talking about the Bengals and we're talking about too many weapons, it's hard to figure out which Bengal to play. It's the NFL is a league that shifts faster than any place else. It's crazy at this point. The Bengals looked legit good last week, smoking Baltimore.
Bengals look awesome.
Yeah.
I'm such a believer in Joe Burrow. I think he's already one of the best QBs in the league. He's going to be for a long time. It looks like, assuming he can stay healthy. Chase is priced up now. I think, you can go there in tournaments because he probably won't be that popular with that, just with his salary now and with that game having a low total. But T. Higgins looks really good too. Still cheap and 15 targets last week. I wouldn't expect them to be passing as much this week, but he should have a chance to get in the end zone. So I like T. Higgins. And then on the Jets side, I think you can take a chance on Michael Carter, 4,900. He had 9 targets last week and caught 8 balls. And the Bengals have given up the most receptions in the league to opposing running backs. So if the Jets are playing from behind, I think Carter looks okay. What about you? Are there any of those lower total games that you like players from?
I actually wanted to ask you kind of a general question. When we're talking about Jacksonville, Seattle, obviously Seattle has these 2 stud wide receivers, and there's been a lot of talk about, one goes off, one doesn't. How do you handle that with they're priced down a little bit, but with a backup quarterback? How are you I just don't want to deal with Geno Smith. Obviously DK hit the big touchdown last week, but a little bit lucky. I had 85-yard touchdown, didn't do anything the rest of the game. Lockett did nothing the whole game. Do you kind of automatically just move away from guys? You're like, I can just play someone else that has a starting quarterback. How quickly do you cross guys off playing with a backup and one that clearly has been limited like Geno has?
Yeah, good question. When it's Geno Smith, I'm probably not even considering Metcalf and Lockett this week. You never want to spend a lot of salary on receivers with bad quarterbacks. At least I don't. I just think, their upside is so limited. It's nice that the salaries have come down, but, they're not even getting many targets. I think I'm just going to cross them off. I understand if people want to take a chance because they're cheaper now and because maybe people aren't going to go there, but we have a lot of receivers in the mid-range that are actually, appealing to play this week. So it's not going to be Seattle receivers for me. I mean, what do you think?
I think the key is just to expand it a little bit, it's not just bad quarterbacks, but it's bad/conservative quarterbacks. You give me a bad guy who's going to take a bunch of risks and maybe throw some picks, but also, force it into my guy, then I'm okay with that. But you can tell that Geno's trying to manage the game. He's trying to hand the ball off. Pete Carroll's trying to have Geno not lose games. You watch those games, you're like, they took one shot to DK and that was it the whole game. Granted, it worked, and the DB fell down and turned into from a 30-yard gain to an 85-yard touchdown. But they are not forcing the ball downfield. They're not forcing the ball in. They're not throwing it a ton. It's just you get that combo, and I think I agree with you. I just think without Wilson there, I think I just play someone else.
Right, and I agree with you. If you have a bad quarterback that's going to be throwing a bunch of deep balls and at least trying to put up points, then I think that's okay. But
old school Jameis Winston is the prime example.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
But conservative Geno, not really taking chances. It seems like
that we might have to trademark that as his nickname. I like that, conservative Geno. I think we can sell some t-shirts with that on there. I'm in. But let's jump into kind of who we think will be the popular kind of cash optimal guys. But first, a note from our sponsors at WynnBET. There's one thing we appreciate here at RotoWire. It's making good decisions, and even more so, making the right decision. Listen up. I have an incredible offer for you with RotoWire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WynnBET is now the exclusive sponsor for RotoWire's fantasy podcast. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more, all at your fingertips. Want a break from sports betting? Head into WynnBET's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down in blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 6 states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, Virginia, all while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering all RotoWire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WynnBET now. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for RotoWire's fantasy podcasts. So, Ryan, let's see. We've got let's start at quarterback. Who you think would be popular? I kind of have 3 different guys at tiers here. I think Josh Allen at the top will be pretty popular. We talked earlier. You can get one guy at the top if you want to. They're playing the Dolphins. He did struggle against them in week 2, but been great since then. Jalen Hurts kind of falls in this middle at 7,200. It's been a lot has been talked about how the first 3 quarters have been rough, but he always gets there. He's over 20 points in each game so far this year. I think he's the only quarterback that's done that. He's 7,200. And then if you drop all the way down, you want to get cheap. I think Teddy Bridgewater at 5,400 against the Washington football team, a team that has given up 3, 2, 4, 4, and 4 passing touchdowns the last 5 weeks. I think those are like the three, the guy in each tier people will go to. But who do you think is a popular quarterback this week? Do you think it's those guys? Do you think it's someone else that jumps out to you? How are you feeling about I don't think there's going to be like a chalk quarterback, but who do you think is going to be in the mix for people?
Yeah, so we're almost on the same page.
Right.
I agree. I agree that there's 3 quarterbacks that I'd consider for cash games at least. Definitely Josh Allen as the spend up. Jalen Hurts for sure. I think Hurts will be like probably the most popular option in cash games. Just like you said, he always gets there. And I mean, he's looked really bad as far as just like being an NFL quarterback, but he's great at scoring fantasy points. And
do you worry that against Detroit, if they get a lead, that we don't get that chaotic last 20 minutes of him trying to catch up?
Yeah, a little bit, but not enough to take me off of him.
But it's Detroit too, so you have to factor that in. Like they're terrible on defense.
Yeah, and I'm just checking here. I think Miles Sanders is going to be out, so
yeah,
I mean it puts a little bit more on Hurts's shoulders, which sort of would push me over the edge if I was worried about the game script at all. But yeah, it's a good spot for Philadelphia against Detroit. So I think Hurts is probably where I'm going to go in cash, and then I guess. I thought there was a cheaper option too.
Who's yours?
For me, it was Carson Wentz.
Okay.
I don't know. That game has the highest total, and Wentz has been playing well. Home game. Yeah, I don't know. I understand Bridgewater too. We could, I guess, split hairs with which is the best option down here.
I think the key is there's 2 options, both under 6,000 that you can play and get there with. I mean, I thought of Bridgewater was matchup plus price, but you get that with Wentz also, and you get probably a better comeback on the game script with Tennessee against Wentz. And you're right, Wentz he's been better the last few weeks. He wasn't great last week, but I think he kind of tossed that out against the Niners. I mean, the game was raining. He still threw 2 touchdowns. I think I lean Bridgewater a little bit, but like I said, I wouldn't argue really hard against for either guy in that range. I think they're pretty close. Yeah,
I haven't been excited about Denver's passing game, but with Judy coming back, I think Judy's going to be back, right? That helps. And like you said, Washington's been bad against the pass, at least from a fantasy perspective. Somehow their D line still ranks as one of the top in the league, but I don't know that necessarily does anything to Bridgewater as far as his fantasy outlook. It might even make them pass the ball more. But yeah, so either of those guys, I guess it's personal preference.
Yeah, and we'll get more into quarterbacks. We talk about some tournament stacks and stuff. But what about running back? I think that the guy that everybody will bold, you already mentioned him as a bust last week, again, is Darrell Henderson. 6,500 this week. Obviously price didn't go up. He was very quiet last week. Did have 6 targets, but he's only 15 for 45 against the Lions. They're at Houston this week, and Houston literally cannot stop the run. It's them and the Chargers. They're brutal. They're 5.2 yards per carry against running backs. The Rams are weird last week. They had 12 red zone plays, and they threw the ball 11 times. Like, they didn't run the ball at all in the red zone. So while we didn't get a ton from Henderson, we also didn't get that red zone carry that we were hoping to get. You want a couple shots at the goal line there. How are you generally with, like, can you go ahead and forget last week really easily? Do you hold a grudge against Darrell Henderson? Where are you this week? Because I think he finds himself on the chalk list again this week.
Yep. I totally agree with you. I'll go right back to Henderson. Yeah, that was unfortunate that he busted last week, but it's just a great spot. Like you said, I think Texans, one of the worst run defenses in the league, one of the worst D lines in the league. I think 29th ranked, and the Rams have a really good offensive line too. It just seems like, we thought they'd have a lead last week and be comfortable against Detroit, and that's almost for sure to happen this week against Houston. It was nice to see Henderson on the field for almost all the plays. I think Sony Michel had 7 or 8 snaps only. And Henderson's price is the same. So yeah, I agree with you. I think he's probably my first running back in for cash games. I think there's about 10 running backs you could play in cash on this slate. I guess starting at the top, Henry and Kamara are fine options, but I don't think I'll spend up at running back this week. If I'm going to spend up, I'd rather play Cooper Kupp, just probably. And just because there's a lot of options at running back, like, you could play Joe Mixon, we mentioned, in a great spot. Fournette still looks good, just like last week. Elijah Mitchell, cheap, 5,400. Some people are talking about Kenneth Gainwell for $5K. He's okay too. And, even guys like James Robinson and DeAndre Swift, they're sort of all similar plays. Even Chuba Hubbard, that's somewhere where I don't know if I'll go back to that. That was pretty brutal, but I understand it. So I think there's a lot of guys you could go to in cash games. Who stands out to you after Henderson?
So Henderson definitely stands out, and I have all that mid-range to talk about a little bit later, but it's a big mid-range. I wanted to ask you, the guy that is interesting to me, and I can't quite figure it out, is 6,200 is Darrell Patterson. They're playing Carolina. You talk about he was kind of getting some carries and still involved in the passing game. He played 73% of the snaps last week. Mike Davis had 1 fantasy point. It is, and after the game they're like, oh, just kind of the way it worked out. But it was a clear shift last week that they want to get the ball in Patterson's hands. He had 14 carries, 60 yards rushing, and a touchdown. He also had 5 targets. If you're going to be involved that much, 6,200 on an offense that, Carolina's a tougher matchup for them this week than they had last week. But what do you do with Patterson? I feel like the upside is big, but I feel like the floor there is no floor. He could have, it wouldn't shock anybody if, Mike Davis had a bunch of carries and Patterson had 6. So it's just, how do you even handle someone like that? I guess your answer would probably be you play him in tournaments, not in cash games, but how do you feel about Patterson?
Right. You said it. Yeah. I think you play him in tournaments, not cash games. I'm with you. I like Patterson, I think, more than most. He just has a lot of upside. They use him in every way, and he scores a lot of touchdowns. They use him near the goal line. He's been catching a bunch of passes. It's crazy that Darrell Patterson is just in the 6K range now as a running back, and we're kind of just okay with it. But yeah, I understand it. I think he's a good tournament play. But I think, just probably a bit too risky for cash games.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. We talk about it like that. You don't obviously always get a cut and dry guy like that. You can really use him in one and not the other. And he's kind of that guy because, like I said, the floor is just not there. But real quick at the top before we hit some popular receivers, Derrick Henry's 8,900. We talked about him. You talked about him and Kamara. Henry was finally a little bit quiet last week. 29 carries though. He only had 86 yards. He wasn't super effective or efficient. Did throw a touchdown pass that helped his stat line a little bit, but. We talked about how he was quiet and kind of busted. He had 31 touches. It's crazy. In they're at Indy this week. Indy's been good against the run, but I'm not sure that matters that much with Henry. The key with Henry is they are going to feed him no matter what the situation is. It is very clear to that with them that they are going to give him the ball a ton. And when you get someone that dangerous with the ball 30 times a game, there's so many ways for him to get there.
Yeah, man, it's crazy to just see 30 touches every game.
Every game.
It's crazy. I keep waiting for that to fall at least a little bit sometimes, but it hasn't. If you're going to tell me that he's going to get 30 touches again against Indy, I still like Henry. He has huge upside. I said, I probably wasn't going to go there, but I get it. You can't ignore those 30 plus touches. I don't know what else to say. He's the best running back in football. He's expensive. I don't know. Where do you fall on Henry this week?
I think that the point you made on him versus Kupp is really key because it probably is either or, right? Kupp's 9,000, Henry's 8,900. This week I go Henry. I know you said you would go Kupp. I'm going to have to at some point play the Rams are a big favorite, not going to throw the ball second half card. It didn't work last week because the Lions got up in that game with some weird stuff. But I think for this week, I think you've got Tennessee, Indy, high total. Should be a close game is what we're anticipating, low spread. I think that Henry's super involved. I think an interesting way to go in that theory is you flip the script and you stack Tennessee quarterback and receiver. I think that's really playable too if you don't want to go Henry. But if I'm picking a top guy this week, it's definitely Henry over Kamara for me. Kamara was huge out of the backfield last week, but I'm just not going to play him against Tampa Bay. I know that he may catch 10 passes again. It's probably the smartest thing to do if Peyton wants to game plan that, but like you're probably not going to run against Tampa Bay. You're not going to get, you just kind of cross that off and you hope for 8 catches. And that's always tough to do. So of the Henry, Kamara, Kupp kind of same price range guys, I don't know if I'm going to go one. I may go super balanced this week, but if I do go one, it's going to be Henry for me.
Yeah, and good point at the end. I don't think it's mandatory to play one of those 3. Like you said, you can make good balanced lineups this week. I if you want, you can, but I guess I don't really have much to add to that. What I will say is, I think I like Kamara a bit more than most this week, just because I think, people aren't going to want to roster him when he's priced that closely to Henry, and also, in a tough matchup. And also, he's going to be a popular play on FanDuel because there's a big price difference there between him and Henry. And sometimes when that's the case, people will choose not to play him on DraftKings as sort of a little bit of a hedge. I like him more than most because New Orleans just doesn't have anybody. And I think he's guaranteed double-digit targets again. I mean, Sean Payton and I forget the offensive coordinator's name. They're usually smart with what they do, and New Orleans has been playing faster than at the start of the season. At the start of the season, I was avoiding New Orleans because they just played so slow. But I kind of like Kamara in this spot. I mean, if he's going to catch 10 balls again, for them to stay in the game with Tampa Bay, he's going to have a big game. I don't know if they can do that, but I'm going to take some chances on him in tournaments.
That's a really good point on FanDuel. He's the 6th highest running back at FanDuel. That's pretty crazy. And he's $2,100 less than Derrick Henry there. That's a really good point. I think that that price difference is he's $200 difference on DraftKings. So that's pretty much nothing. You pretty much play who you want there. But with $2,100 difference, you could do a lot with $2,100 at other spots.
Definitely. So, I think that leads to people playing him over Henry on FanDuel, and then the opposite on DraftKings.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So what about receiver? I think we talked about Kupp. He's 9,000, just an insane start to the season. He had 13 more targets last week, 10 for 156, 2 touchdowns. Granted, this game script could get out of hand, but maybe they get out of hand because they're feeding Cooper Kupp. He has double-digit targets all 7 weeks. This is a insane level of breakout for a guy that was already really good. I mean, he has 90+ yards in 6 of 7 games. It's been an unreal start to the season. We have him at 9,000, and then you jump down. You mentioned Jamar Chase, 7,500. I think that you kind of thought that he's not going to be that popular. I just wonder, coming off that 200-yard game on 10 targets, everybody's going to be talking about him. But you're right. It's a kind of a low total game script kind of thing too.
Yeah, I could be wrong. Maybe he will be popular. Yep, he is a guy that people like to play. And coming off that huge game, people look at that and see a matchup against the Jets. So, people will roster him. Kupp, I mean, we've already said it. He's the same as Devontae Adams now. Like they use him the same way. He's just in a different class of these receivers. Definitely, I worry about these matchups, but it's really cost me fading Kupp the last 2 weeks in similar matchups. Like you said, if the Rams blow them out, there's a good chance that Kupp is the reason why.
Is Chris Godwin the most popular receiver this week at 6,400?
Yeah, good shout. I think he should be. Yeah, I really like Godwin. We mentioned last week when he was 5,900 that it was just way too cheap. And with Antonio Brown out, 6,400 is just way too cheap still. For cash games, Godwin, I think, is the first receiver in my lineup.
Yeah, I don't think you'd be alone with that one. I mean, that one sticks out pretty good. We do have a lot of mid-range receivers we're going to talk about here in a little bit, but I think he jumps out as like a guy who's a stud with a stud quarterback in a game that is a decently high total for this slate. He pretty much when you scroll and you're like, oh, where's Goddard? You keep scrolling, you're like, yeah, that's pretty much a slam dunk there. Do you think that Gronk being back affects him a bunch? I mean, I know they like to throw Gronk in the red zone, but I think that with Brown out, it's kind of the way to go.
Yeah, I think it might affect just like his touchdown equity just a little bit, because we know Brady loves to get Gronk touchdowns, and especially coming back from the injury, you figure once down in the red zone, or at least once, he's going to be looking for Gronk. But otherwise I wouldn't worry about it. Antonio Brown being out just frees up enough targets and usage where he's still going to be a great play.
I mean, Mike Evans had 3 touchdowns last week, but Godwin still had 11 targets. So it's not like they just kind of both did really well. And Godwin he had 8 for 111. But I think we talked last week about like Antonio Brown, like Brady was really looking to him, focusing on him. He's getting a ton of action, but if he wasn't in, you got to move elsewhere, and he's not in again. So I think that as we see some lineups come out, I think Godwin will be in a lot of people's lineups. But let's get into some of those tournament lineups. But first, a note from our sponsors at Yahoo Dfs. The new NFL season is underway, and Yahoo's excited to kick off daily fantasy football. There'll be a ton of big prize contests throughout the season, including their multi-entry contest now being shark-free. To celebrate the beginning of football season, I guess we're in the middle of football season now, and Yahoo Daily Fantasy becoming shark-free, Yahoo is giving all users the opportunity to claim a free contest entry credit of $10. Users can take advantage of the free $10 contest entry credit offer to join one of Yahoo's biggest contests. In addition to free credit, Yahoo has a $1 million DFS contest that is now live. The $1 million contest features $1 million in total prizes, including first place receiving $100,000 and entry into the first ever Yahoo Fantasy Football Championship live event finals, which will occur at MGM National Harbor in Maryland this December. Play daily fantasy football on Yahoo this season. Visit sports.yahoo.com/dailyfantasy/welcome to claim the free $10 offer to get started. So what about quarterback receiver? We kind of start our lineups with these stacks. Who do you want to play together? There's a lot of options this week, but I think you said earlier there's not one that like everybody's going to go to. There's not even 1 or 2 that are going to go to. I think that's a lot of choices, a lot of options. We talked about some of them so far. I want to start with Josh Allen. You mentioned Josh Allen at the top, kind of the expensive guy. Are you looking to stack Allen and Diggs this week? Is that too expensive? Where do you fall in stacks this week?
Yeah, glad that you started there. I am going to stack Josh Allen and Diggs. I really like Diggs for tournaments this week. We haven't seen like a huge explosion game from Diggs. You
feel like it's coming though. You feel like it's coming though, right?
You feel like it's coming, yeah. And the Bills, they just like to put it on teams. They'll just keep scoring. They beat Miami 35-0 in week 2. I think coming off a bye, I expect them to look good. I expect them to put up a lot of points. And you mentioned, that stack is expensive, which might keep some people away. But I love rostering Allen with Diggs and I think you can throw another Bills pass catcher in there, because when you pay, 8-1 for a QB, you're looking for him to throw 4 or 5 touchdowns. So they're not all going to go to Diggs. I think you pair him with Emmanuel Sanders, Cole Beasley, and then also they have Dawson Knox out. So you can use 2,900 Tommy Sweeney if you want to as well, who got in the end zone last week. Really like Bills stacks. You don't have to run it back with Dolphins, but there are options, especially if Devontae Parker's out again. Love Waddle, love Gesicki. I like Gesicki no matter what. I am. That is one of the games I'm targeting. What about you, Scott? What are you looking at?
I like that one too, and I think that you can. Like you said, you can come back with Waddle or Gesicki, and they're both. And it seems like Miami's opening up a little more too. Like Tua threw the ball pretty well last week. He still makes some like mistakes where you're like, what are you doing there? But like they're active, they're involved, they're throwing the ball, they're not sitting on it, which is exactly what you want in stack. You want Miami to score 17, 21 points in that game for your Bills stack. But I do like that one a lot. I think you play Brady with Godwin. I think the key with that is that Tampa Bay's smart enough where they realize that New Orleans is great against the run, and Brady will be like, screw it, I'm just going to throw the ball 50 times. So I think that like game plan works in there. Even if they get up, I think game plan really helps there, because I don't think they're going to run. They're going to force the run if it's not there, where some teams are so stubborn. They're like, I'm going to run it just to establish it. Kyle Shanahan. But you get Tom Brady that he doesn't care. Like if they'll just like, okay, we'll just do something different. They did against the Rams. I think it's one of those games early on, but it was Rams. Someone else. There was someone that was like same point where you're not going to run against his team. Go ahead and throw the ball. The one that I like that nobody's talking about this week, I like Justin Herbert this week at 7,300 with Keenan Allen at 6,500. You can run that back with Jacoby Myers, who is involved but never scores a touchdown. You can run it back. You could think about running it back with Damian Harris against the worst running defense in the league. The Chargers are really bad running the ball, but New England was good last week against the Jets, but that's the Jets and they can't pass the ball. Dak had 445 and 3 touchdowns in week 6. Davis Mills, of all people, had 312 and 3 against New England in week 5. They're off a terrible game. I think they've been stewing on that game 2 weeks ago against Baltimore for a while. They had a bye last week. I think nobody's really talking about Herbert this week. I love stacking him with Allen and kind of getting super aggressive there and hope that they figured out whatever happened in week 6 is kind of a fluke game and they're back to their week 1 through 5 offense.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. No one's really talking about Herbert and that Chargers stack. I think it makes a lot of sense. Like you said too, people don't like to play Damian Harris, but he makes a lot of sense as a run back with the Chargers run defense being so bad. And then tight end's sort of a weird position this week, so you can add Jared Cook in your stacks too. He actually looks like one of the better cheap plays at tight end. I think that's a really good call.
Do you go with Allen if you do that? Do you bump up $1,200 to Mike Williams? How do you feel about which receiver to pick there between the two? I lean towards saving the money and hoping it works out. And Allen still gets a lot of targets. I know Mike Williams had the big blow up games, but I save the money there, and I think they're close enough where I could use it elsewhere.
Yeah, I lean towards Allen as well. It's been real. I've rostered him on a lot of these weeks where he just catches 7 or 8 balls for 40 yards or 50 yards, but he's got to have a big game sooner or later, and he will get in the end zone, at some point too. I'd go Allen, just more targets, and you save $1,200. I agree.
And that Baltimore game was weird. I know he had 5 targets, but they were just out of sync in that game. He had 12, 11, and 9 3 weeks before that, so still heavily involved. What about on the sneakier side? Any other stacks you like that maybe people aren't talking about, people aren't playing?
Yeah, on the sneakier side,
how do you feel about that Titan? We brought up the Titans one with Henry. Do you like Tannehill and AJ Brown this week? Indy's really bad against the pass.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think Tannehill and AJ Brown I'd be okay with.
AJ Brown looks awesome right now.
He does. It was unfortunate that they blew Kansas City out because Brown was going to have a huge game.
The words we thought we'd never be saying, right?
It's unbelievable. Yeah, I think he only got 1 ball in the second half. They didn't have to throw, but yeah, I like that. I'm definitely piggybacking on your Brady and Tampa Bay call. I think that'll be overlooked too. And for all the reasons you said, it just makes so much sense. Brady's on an MVP mission and they're going to have to throw the ball against a good run defense.
You mentioned Wentz earlier. Do you stack him with Pittman? Kind of the one guy there that it seems to be pretty heavily focused on.
Yeah, so I like just a little skinny stack of Wentz, Pittman, and then either AJ Brown or Henry. It just makes a lot of sense. If you're going to play AJ or if you're going to play Henry, and you want him to score 3 touchdowns and have a big game, so Wentz is going to have to keep Indy in it. And Pittman's looks great. And the salaries are cheap on both Wentz and Pittman. But I also think you could
play Henry. That's a good point. Yeah.
And you can also run that back with AJ Brown, just great options in that game. So I do like, I will have some Wentz exposure. There's a game I'll mention. Maybe you can talk about it a little. I'm not really on it, but I totally understand it. I think there's plays from both sides, and that's Atlanta, Carolina. What do you think about that game?
Weird game, right? You kind of think Atlanta, Carolina think a lot of points. I never like to stack Matt Ryan. I think I'm just scarred. I think that's a bad way to play, but I think he's I've timed him so badly so many times, but yeah, I think you could do that. I'm not touching a Sam Darnold stack at all anyway. I'll play DJ Moore by himself in some lineups maybe. I mean, he's still expensive enough where I don't think anybody's going to be on him just because he's expensive, and you've got Sam Darnold who looks horrible last few weeks. He actually got benched last week. And Robbie Anderson's going to get 10 targets for 3 catches for 8 yards. And I don't think I want to play that either. He's cheap, but I think what I'll do in that game more than anything is I will play either Pitts or Calvin Ridley. I like Ridley by himself. He's 6,600. I think it's kind of what you mentioned with the Stephon Diggs stuff. Not quite as much, but I think he's due for that big game. He's still getting a lot of targets. Just a lot of underneath targets. They're using him in a weird way because they're using Kyle Pitts kind of over the top. And Pitts looked really good the last couple of weeks. I don't think I'm going to spend up enough at tight end to play Pitts, but I think I will have Ridley. He's kind of the guy in that game I play. You go Chuba Hubbard. You mentioned last week it was a little scary. They're not. He's heavily involved, but Carolina's just not running the ball well, and it scares me a little bit. But out of that game, I think Ridley's gonna be my most popular play.
Yeah, so I'm with you on. I don't like rostering Matt Ryan either. I've definitely been scarred from him. What I will say is, he has multiple touchdown passes in 5 straight games. He's thrown for over 303 of them, and he's put up at least 22 fantasy points in 4 of 5. So the numbers are still pretty good. It's definitely puzzling. Ridley's production has been a little bit puzzling. Yeah, I agree with you. And then, sort of for the reason you said, where you might not find yourself spending up at tight end and getting to Kyle Pitts, I think that makes him a good tournament play. There's just a really good chance that he ends up as the top scoring tight end. And then, I won't be playing Sam Darnold on the other side, but I think, like you said, Robbie Anderson, I guess if you're a Robbie Anderson believer,
if you want to play the targets at a low money, usually like targets at under 5,000 receiver, I am all over that. I just I don't know. I did it 2 weeks ago. It was so gross to watch. He got the late touchdown and kind of saved it, but it's been rough. And Darnold, you got to figure that he's like 2 or 3 bad series away from going to PJ Walker, which might not be terrible. PJ Walker has a cannon. He came in last week and had a dart to DJ Moore in his first throw. And I'm like, oh, here we go. Let's go time DJ Moore time. But I don't know. It's just that offense is kind of a mess right now.
Yeah. And then just one other one that's going to be sneaky. I don't really think anyone's going to play Joe Burrow this week. I wouldn't stack that game, fully, because it's pretty unappealing and has a low total, but you can skinny stack that game with Burrow and either Chase or Higgins. And I would run it back with the cheap running back, Michael Carter, or you could also run it back with Corey Davis. Just no one's really going to do that. And, people are going to play Joe Mixon, but if, all 4 of the touchdowns go to Burrow instead of Mixon, that's possible. So I think that stack is in play as one that would be less popular.
Yeah, the Carter point's interesting because if you figure that you play the Cincy stack to get, score early, then Carter catches a bunch of balls out of the backfield. It kind of works. Like it was somebody last week. It was with DeAndre Swift. I think it was with the Rams. We're like, well, if he's the one running back where you're okay if they get behind by 17 points because they're going to just dump it off to him a ton. So I could see that working with Carter. I do want to get into mid-range running backs. I think there's a lot, but before we get there, there's 4 guys in the 7,000s that I think are just. I just want to know quick if you have a strong feeling. We got Austin Eckler 7,900, Najee Harris at 7,500 on DraftKings. He's really expensive. He's 9,000 on FanDuel. DeAndre Swift, we just mentioned, is 7,100 on DraftKings. Jonathan Taylor 7,200 in that Indy Tennessee game. We talked about kind of passing there in Henry. We haven't talked about Taylor. Before I get in the mid-range guys in the 6s who I think are really important, are there any of these 4 guys in the 7s you kind of find yourself moving towards more than the others?
Yeah. So I really liked Austin Eckler until he popped up with this questionable tag from missing practice yesterday. I'll still like Eckler if he's active. Sometimes I like to play these guys sometimes with questionable tags because, people are so afraid of doing it. But
I think he's in a price range too, where people are going to they're going to go up or they're going to go down. I don't see a lot of people playing him at 7,900. Yeah,
you're exactly right. Yeah, where he's priced, people will decide either to go up or to go down. So I like that. I'm going to be off Najee Harris just because it's such a mismatch in that game between the Browns defensive line and the Steelers offensive line. Now that's probably good for Harris to catch some passes, but it's not a good matchup for the Steelers. I like DeAndre Swift. Yeah, definitely like DeAndre Swift. I think, we keep talking about all the passes he catches. It's unbelievable. 8 catches on 10 targets last week. And, he runs the ball too. And matchup against Philly is actually pretty good for Detroit just because, Philly's offense isn't very good a lot of times, and Detroit should end up in some favorable spots throughout the game. So yeah, I like DeAndre Swift.
Jonathan Taylor's on fire right now. I think he's actually my favorite in this group. Over 100 total yards each of the last 4 games, 6 touchdowns. Tennessee is 27th in yards per carry allowed at 4.7. It's a little frustrating with Taylor. Every once in a while, you're like, are they going to give him the ball and give him the ball and the ball? And finally gets there. I think he's just a boom guy too. Like I love the combo of him being really good, but also a guy that can hit a 60-yarder. So I think Taylor is actually my favorite in this range at 7,200. I see the Swift and Eckler thoughts too. I think if I'm going somewhere, I don't know if I am, I might get down to the 6,000s. There's a lot of options I like in there, but for me, it's Taylor in a game that has a high total that I think could be back and forth, and I think the Taylor can catch the ball too. And they seem to be leaning towards him a little bit more the last 3 weeks versus the first 3 weeks of the season. It seems like there's a little less Nyheim Hines and more kind of leaning on JT.
Yeah, and I don't mean to overlook Taylor.
There's a lot of guys to talk about. Yeah,
he definitely might. Yeah, he could be the best option in that range. You said it. He's been crushing 20 plus fantasy points in 4 straight. Been catching more passes, and Marlon Mack didn't see the field last game after he had been involved in the weeks before. Yeah, definitely like Taylor.
So this mid-range, we talked about Joe Mixon, really good game script against the Jets. He was only 12.59 last week, but they threw the ball a ton against Baltimore. Burrow had over 400 yards. Great game script here. The Jets have allowed 11 touchdowns to running backs. I like James Robinson here, 6,600. He's like really super involved last 4 weeks. Like the first couple of weeks were weird. Urban Meyer hadn't figured it out, but Robinson's been really good. Seattle is 31st in yards allowed to opposing running backs. 5 running backs have over 80 rush yards on them already this season. Kamara had 180 total yards last week. I really like James Robinson, 6,600, a game that I think I don't know how high it's going to be, but I think it'll be close. And I think Robinson's going to be heavily involved. We mentioned Damian Harris. The Chargers can't stop the run right now. You worry a little bit about game script there, and he is a bit of a game script guy. If they get behind, they don't really lean on him. But you mentioned Chuba Hubbard at 6,000. Who's your favorite guy in this range?
Yeah, this is a tough range. I
know the answer is Darrell Henderson, but we're kind of taking him out of this because he's obviously there. But you like Mixon, you like Robinson, do you like Harris? How do you feel about those guys?
Besides Henderson, yeah, I think I'm on the same page as you. My top 2 would be Mixon and James Robinson. Yeah, you mentioned a tough matchup for Fournette against that Saints running defense, so let's just forget about him. And then, Robinson's looked good, and that's probably a better matchup than people might realize against a Geno Smith-led team. So, yeah, I really, really like James Robinson. And then, Mixon, it's just a really good matchup. He has upside for a 100-yard rushing game and multiple TDs. So I think those are the 2 that I would be on.
Talk to me about the cheap running backs. We've got, you mentioned Eli Mitchell at 5,400. He had 18 for a $107 against Indy last week with a touchdown. I think he had the touchdown. I think he did. You mentioned Kenneth Gainwell quickly at the top. He's 5,000. Miles Sanders is not going to play. Gainwell and Boston Scott kind of split duty last week after Sanders left. Boston Scott seemed to be the carry guy. He had 7 carries. Gainwell had 5, but Gainwell had 8 targets last week. I'd love to see that with Hurts. He was 4 for 41, a touchdown, catching the ball, 8 targets. If I'm going somewhere here, for me, it's Gainwell over Scott, just based on that target usage. He's 5,000. We have David Johnson as 4,200. Mark Ingram traded this week. I don't think I can ever go back to David Johnson, but he had 6 targets last week. If you fully wanted to punt at 4,200, could be a nice PPR floor guy. If they get way behind the Rams, they dump it off to him, 6 or 7 times. I think you're leaning towards Mitchell, but where are you in this range?
Yeah, I'm pretty much on the same page as you. I'm leaning towards Mitchell. I think it's going to be a really good game environment for him against a not great defensive line who are missing some key players. Nobody has talked about Khalil Herbert this week. No. I think he's okay though. I mean, it was nice to see him catch 5 balls last week. It was nice to see Damian Williams barely involved, and he also pulled off the rare feat of rushing for over 100 against the vaunted Buccaneers run defense. So I don't mind if you want to go to Herbert. I can even understand if you like him more than Mitchell. I slightly prefer Mitchell. But yeah, I like Gainwell. Like you said, he may not, just jump in and see a bunch of carries.
Yeah.
Miles Sanders wasn't seeing carries, and Gainwell isn't really that type of running back anyways. But Boston Scott might get more of the running work, but I do like Gainwell more. Yeah, those 8 targets are nice to see. It is a plus matchup.
You give me 8 targets at 5K, and I could probably make that work.
Absolutely, yeah. So definitely. Yeah, I definitely like Gainwell this week. And I've mentioned Michael Carter a couple times. I think he's sneaky for 4,500. Just let me check real quick. If
I would play Carter, I'd play Carter over David Johnson for sure, by the way.
Yeah, and I know Tevin Coleman has a questionable tag here, but if he's out again, then yeah, I really like Michael Carter.
Tevin Coleman, funny enough, is also really bad at football. So there's that.
Yeah, good point.
Someone in the chat asked us, "So what site do you guys play on? DraftKings, FanDuel?" I play a lot on both, actually. I play a little bit of Yahoo Dfs also. It's one of our sponsors. We thank them for that. I do play there also. Do you have a site that you play primarily on, or you kind of split it also?
Yeah, so I used to be split DraftKings and FanDuel, but the last 2 years I lived in London and you can't play FanDuel there. So I'd been exclusively playing on DraftKings, and it's kind of just continued over since I got back to the States. So yeah, I mostly play on DraftKings.
Did you go to any of the London NFL games while you were there?
Oh, it's disappointing. I didn't, and I actually had tickets for this one just a couple weeks ago, but it was right just a few days after I flew back to the States. So no, I didn't get a chance to. But also those London games, I think they've been like the worst. They just put the worst 2 teams in those matchups.
Do I want to pay to go watch Jacksonville play the Jets? So yeah, maybe not.
I do think it'd be cool to see a game at Wembley though. So I do plan on doing that when I go back.
Someone asked in the chat, would you start? We're going to get to mid-range receivers in 1 second. We'll probably answer this, but would you start Emmanuel Sanders, Chase Claypool, or Sterling Shepard if you had to pick one of the 2? One of the 3.
Yeah, is Sterling Shepard? They're not on this slate, are they?
They are not on the slate.
Just for fantasy football?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I go Claypool, and I think I like the targets with no Juju. I think I love Sterling Shepard as a player, but if those 3, I'd probably just go Claypool and move on.
Yeah, I think you're probably the better guy for this, but I think I'd agree with you. Yeah.
So before we jump into the receivers here, we want to hit the mid-range here real quick. Note from our sponsors at Thrive. Thrive is back for another season of fantasy football, and they're running huge guaranteed contests each week this NFL season. With Thrive Fantasy, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus on only the top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Sign up today and get a free 6-month RotoWire subscription. Here's how you do that. Number 1, go to rotowire.com/thrive. Secondly, deposit a minimum of $10 and receive a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. And then 3, play in your first paid contest on Thrive. You'll automatically receive a free 6-month RotoWire subscription. So we talked about the expensive receivers. What are you doing kind of mid-range? We talked about Calvin Ridley. We talked about Chris Godwin's going to be really popular. We talked about A.J. Brown. Since someone asked about Chase Claypool, what about the Pittsburgh receivers? We have Deontay Johnson, 6,700, Chase Claypool, 6,300. I think I like that the player pool is limited here with Juju Smith-Schuster out. Do you have a guy here that you want to play? Do you want to avoid both of them? How do you feel about jumping into the Ben Roethlisberger offense here?
Yeah, so
the long, heavy sighs about how I feel about Ben too.
Yeah, I was thinking about these Steelers receivers this morning though. So, it's not a game that I'm really targeting. So initially I wasn't on those receivers, but I don't think Pittsburgh's going to be able to run the ball. And yeah, the point you made about, Juju being out, we love those situations where, the usage is sort of condensed. And one of those, Deontay Johnson or Claypool, you'd think is going to have a big game. So yeah, I'm okay with both as one-offs, and I don't think people don't want to play those Steelers receivers with Roethlisberger and just in this matchup. So yeah, I think it makes sense.
I really like Deontay Johnson. I think it's even more for me. Like I'm gonna get him in some lineups. He's 6,700. We talk about double-digit targets guy. He's very quiet. It's weird because he had a 2-target game and he had a game where he didn't play. So he's kind of hidden a little bit in the total targets. But his other 4 games, 10, 12, 13, and 13 targets. I get that his A dot is low. I get that he's running a lot of routes. But like In 3 of those games, he has 9 catches. Like, you start me off with 9 catches, and I don't really care what else happens. He goes from 9 for 71. That's like, you don't love that, but for 16 points at this price, if that's that's an okay game. I can get along with that. Then he scores once, all of a sudden you got a really nice game. I think he's a really good player. Without Juju, Claypool's kind of the deep guy. They're going to dump to Najee Harris. I do get that, but I think Deontay's the guy when they drop back. Ben just focused. He was even last year. He focused in on Deontay a ton, even when they had all 3 guys. And I just think Deontay's a really good play here at 6,700. I think he'll go kind of under rostered because you have Ridley right there, you have Keenan Allen right there, you have AJ Brown right there, and then we already talked about Godwin. Like, there's so many guys in here. I think the Steelers guys get lost a little bit, and I think Deontay's a really nice play this week.
Man, fantastic points. I mean, I needed one person to sell me. Really, I agree with you. I like Deontay more than Ridley this week. You mentioned all those targets, and it's going to happen again this week because Ben is going to have to get the ball out quickly, and he's going to be looking for Deontay all the time. Yeah, I expect double-digit targets. I expect a lot of catches, and maybe he gets in the end zone this time. I think he's a great one-off. Yeah, I'm happy you said that.
Yeah, I love this range. I'm going to have some lineups where I play 3 guys in this range and just kind of not play the expensive guys. I think I go Deontay, Ridley, Keenan Allen pretty nicely. All guys who are under 7,000, are over 7,000 a lot of weeks last year. I just feel like it's coming for some of these guys, and it's always dangerous to play the he's due for a big game kind of thing. But I feel like these guys are getting enough targets too, where even if they don't hit huge, at least they're decent. So, what about below 6? You mentioned Jalen Waddle; he's 5,600. You talk about short targets as we're talking about Ridley and Deontay and Keenan, like he's that guy too. 5,600, 8 targets last week. He was 7 for 83. 27 targets last 2 weeks. This is a nice game script game against Buffalo. We talked about that earlier. We talked about the Allen Diggs stack. Like, you can see Waddle getting 10 to 12 targets here pretty easily.
Yeah, I love Waddle if Devante Parker's out. If Parker plays, I don't think that eliminates Waddle from the conversation at all, because we don't know how if Parker's going to be limited or what his role is going to be. But it would take me off Waddle just a little because you'd expect him to see a few less targets. I like T. Higgins for 5,200. It's just
15 targets is hard to get past.
15 targets, and then Cincinnati is going to have a lot of chances to score touchdowns in this game. Just going against Mike White, I believe his name is. I didn't even know he was in the NFL until last week.
It is correct. It's Mike White. And just a note on that, Robert Saleh said earlier today that Corey Davis has not looked into play too. So we mentioned him quick in the receivers, but that makes me maybe like Michael Carter a little bit more too.
Yeah, so I think all those Cincinnati guys are going to have plenty of chances to score touchdowns, and 5,200 for all those targets last week. We haven't seen like a big T. Higgins game yet. It's been all Jamar Chase, and one of these games it's going to happen.
And the funny thing is that 15 targets, 4 of them were deep balls too. It's not like he was just like dunking and dunking to him. Like, they took some shots to him also. It just didn't happen. Like that, his 762 was about as low as that game could have been last week.
Yep. So I really like Higgins, and then for the same price or $100 more, I like Michael Pittman too. It seems like T.Y. Hilton is gonna play, but I wouldn't let that put me off Pittman. 5,300 is just a good price for a game that has the highest total. What about you? Where are you looking in this range?
So I like the names you mentioned, but there's one more that I really like that me playing. It's Devante Smith at Detroit for the Eagles. He's 5,500. He was 5 of 61 last week, but he had 9 targets. I know he hasn't scored since week 1. Kind of like that. 9+ targets in 3 of his last 4. He's the super clear number 1. Like, there's a lot of other stuff in this offense. Some weeks it's Jalen Reagor, some weeks it's Quez Watkins, Dallas Goddard. It was involved last week, but Detroit's allowing 10.8 yards per target to wide receivers. They cannot cover anybody. I think Smith's going to get a lot of targets. You give me a lot of targets against Detroit, I'm in on that at all every time. 5,500. I think Devante scores this week, and we're looking at 75+ yards too.
I like that call.
What about cheap guys? I struggle to find cheap guys. I love the mid-range this week, but I really found it hard. Jerry Jeudy's 4,900. Tyler Boyd, who is the clear third option in this offense, is 4,800. But like, he was really good weeks 2 through 4, and then Jamar Chase kind of blew up, and he's kind of hidden since then. But there were not a lot of names in the 4,000s. Usually this is an area I really like to attack, and this is a week where I think I like a lot of the 5s, a lot of the 6s, and I'm going to play a little more balanced lineup and probably not go down here a ton.
Oh yeah, man, Scott. I was hoping you were gonna give me.
I got a couple in the 3s, but none in the 4s.
Okay, good. I'm relying on you for the 3s because I don't like these cheap wide receivers either. But I think there's some guys you can play in the upper 4s. You mentioned Judy. I think he's okay. Again, we mentioned Robbie Anderson. He's all right. If you're still a believer, he's been seeing a lot of targets, so that's okay. I don't mind Cole Beasley as a second wide receiver in Josh Allen stacks. Like Allen, Diggs, Beasley, I think is okay. And then one other guy, sort of off the board, maybe Laviska Shenault. I think
everybody's done with him at the moment, so that's probably the right time to play him, right?
Okay, yeah. Well, he saw 10 targets again last time Jacksonville played. It was the second time this season that he's seen 10 targets. And I like Jacksonville coming off a bye. It's a good matchup against Geno Smith and company. And Shenault, he's going to break one for a touchdown soon. He's that type of player. So like a less popular guy, I don't mind taking a chance on Shenault.
I really like that one. That was one that I had not considered strong. And I look at his game log, and it's better than I thought it's been. He's been over 50 yards the last 3 weeks. You mentioned the 10 targets last week, and I think that everybody loved him in the first couple of weeks, and now he's kind of an afterthought coming off the bye. I really like that play. That's a really good one. I think I'm gonna steal that one, I think.
Awesome. So where are you? Talk to me about some 3K guys that you like.
I mean, it's rough. There's a couple guys that I think are playable. The first is Van Jefferson for the Rams. He's 3,900. He had 7 targets last week. I get that the game script, we talked about that, it could be out of control, but if someone under 4,000 with a really good quarterback playing near an MVP level, he hits 27 targets last 5 weeks. He's getting about 5 targets a week, but not only that, but can hit the big play. I think you want that under 4,000. I think he's playable. I wish the matchup was not a game where they were heavily favored against Houston. And the other one is the same game. I think that when you get that game script, we talked about him last week. We talked about Nico Collins. He was only 2 for 28. He was disappointing. He was not. Rashad Bateman is the other guy we talked about down here. He worked out really well. He had 80 yards, and if you played him, he worked out fine for the price. I think he had 11 points or 11 and a half or something like that. But Collins still had 5 targets last week. They're going to be playing. It's great game script. I like him a lot more if Tyrod Taylor plays. I just don't trust Davis Mills. Even though I'm a Stanford fan, I don't trust Davis Mills. He's just not quite there yet. But if Tyrod plays, Nico Collins has 11 targets last week. I think he's just a talented guy. We usually get guys on here that are getting targets, but kind of mad. I think Nico Collins is talented, can hit a big play. Good game script. 3,200 is the key here. The price is really good. He's a risky play. Obviously, we're down here at this range, but I think that he is someone that you could if you need a punt play down at the bottom, I think if you get 5 targets out of him, maybe you hit a big one and it kind of works out. Yeah.
I agree with a lot of what you said. Yeah. It seems like Tyrod Taylor, is he going to be back? It seems like
they're still kind of up in the air, but I think they're leaning that way at the moment. But it's still, it's one of those things you got to check on Saturday night or Sunday morning. If he's playing, I'm more interested in Nico than I was before, and I think he's going to play. I think it's going to lean that way, but you got to check that one.
I think so too, and I'm absolutely more interested in Texans receivers if Tyrod Taylor plays. I pretty much want. I'm not going to play him with Davis Mills, but
Brandon Cooks is under 6,000. If Tyrod plays, he was peppering him with targets early in the season.
Definitely. Yeah. And Cooks, I'm glad you brought that up. He's been a popular play basically every week the past month with Davis Mills, and I haven't liked it. I haven't rostered him even one time in that span. I just don't want to play a guy that has Davis. Just not a lot of upside with Mills. But yeah, I would be okay with Cooks if Tyrod Taylor plays. I was just looking at these Houston guys because you mentioned Collins for 3,200. With Amendola back, does that affect anything? I see he had 5 targets last week for the minimum price.
Yeah, I mean a little bit. You could probably pick either guy, I suppose. I think Nico Collins has a little more upside. I think Amendola, you're looking at 4 for 31 is in play, and I just don't want that. I think Nico Collins can hit a big play, but I wouldn't argue hard either way when we're down here. I think you're looking for targets, you're looking for game script. I think we get that with both guys.
Definitely, yeah. And then Yeah, so I agree with you about Van Jefferson, that he was the one who I picked out too. And just one thing to say about that game script. I don't mind it as much for the cheap guys as for the expensive guys, because the cheap guys just don't need as much to get there. So Jefferson can do it with a few catches, one big catch. It's okay if that game's out of hand because he only needs a couple plays anyways.
Yeah. Real quick before we get to tight ends and finish up quick, we've gone a little bit long. Someone asked in the chat if you had to play someone in your flex, Robbie Anderson, Odell Beckham, or Marquez Callaway. Oof.
That's a tough one.
How full is the waiver wire? I'm gonna go Marquez Callaway in a game where I think the Saints are gonna have to throw the ball in the second half.
Yeah, so I've heard people talking about possibly taking a chance on Odell Beckham this week, on DraftKings because he's so cheap. But yeah, if it's just who's going to score the most points out of those receivers, I'll take Callaway too. I think it's a good game script for.
Yeah. I was one of those people on Beckham, and I'm kind of just you guys got to show me a week here first. But tight end, we've kind of hit as we talked along here. We talked about Pitts. We talked about Mike Gesicki at 5,000. We kind of talked about Dallas Goddard. We talked about Jalen Hurts. You got Tyler Higbee at 4,500. I really like Ricky Seals-Jones again at 3,800. I just think that the targets are there. 9, 6, and 7 the last 3 weeks. At Denver, I think the Washington Denver game will be a little spicier points wise than some people think. I think we're going to get a few more points there. I don't know. You're going to give me 7 targets under 4,000 together, using in the red zone also. I think if I'm going under 4,000 at tight ends, I'm going to go back to RSJ and kind of call it a day. Just give me the targets at that price.
I agree. Yep. Give me Ricky Seals-Jones again. It's awesome to see all those targets, and Heineke loves throwing to him around the goal line. It's sort of been, that touchdown he caught 2 weeks ago was a 39-yard touchdown, but we're going to see some goal line touchdowns out of Seals-Jones this year too. So
Washington lived in the red zone last week against Green Bay. It was the weirdest game. Every time I looked up, Heineke's inside the 20 and they couldn't score. It was the weirdest, strangest game. They outgained Green Bay. They probably should have won that game. And you look at the score, you're like, Green Bay beat Washington, whatever. But they were it lived in the red zone in the second half. It was a strange game. Yeah. Dallas Goddard is 4,700. The key is that Zach Ertz is no longer there. They traded him to the Cardinals. He played 93% of the snaps last week. Will he still play? He played almost every snap, had 5 targets at 3 of 7. I think that he's pretty playable at 4,700 also. I'd probably go Gesicki and pay $300 more myself. But, Gesicki's targets last week, 7, 9, and 8 in a game where they're going to have to throw in the second half to hang with Buffalo. Tua loves throwing to him. He was 7 for 85 last week. I can see Fant, I can see Higbee, I can see Goddard all in the same range, but I just prefer Gesicki to all of them.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I think all 4 of those guys are playable.
You mentioned Tommy Sweeney at 2,900. Is that someone you'd play? You would have to be in a stack with Allen, or you kind of if you need a punt play at the end, do you think he's enough involved to do it?
Yeah, that's a good question. It would probably be with Allen. I think he's all right. It's tough to say. He has touchdown upside in this matchup, but I don't really know how many passes he's going to catch. If we're looking in that cheap range for tight ends, I think Jared Cook is okay. The price just seems too cheap for the amount of targets he gets and just how good the Chargers offense is. And then one guy that's maybe a little bit under the radar, 2,800 Dan Arnold. He's got 13 targets since joining Jacksonville. And I mentioned I like Jacksonville coming off a bye. Yeah.
So I could pencil you in for the Lawrence Chenault Dan Arnold stack then.
Yeah, if I was that's a stack that I wouldn't mind for the million maker. That's right? A million maker stack.
I joke, but big tournament stack, you could see that that's kind of an interesting one. I know at Seattle's a tough spot for a rookie to play, but right. Yeah, the Arnold play is nice. 13 targets. I would play Arnold over Tommy Sweeney if I were doing a standalone. I think Mo Alley Cox is playable at 3,200. Only 10 targets last week, but he scored the last 2. He has 4 touchdowns the last 4 weeks. The coach came out this week and said they don't want to get more involved. He's a really good athlete. I think that he's got a lot of touchdown equity there, so I think he works. But I'd probably just go Seals-Jones at 3,800 and call it a day there.
Yep.
Funny, someone in the chat just said no love for Cox as I brought him up, so I was ahead of the game there. Julia J, thanks for that question. Awesome. What about defense? strange pricing this week on defense. Like the Rams are 5,100. I forget who. There's someone. Tampa Bay is 4,200, and then Buffalo, who like has been outscoring everybody on defense all year. I think they're the highest scoring defense in fantasy. Is 3,300 against Miami. Do you think that people are just going to gravitate towards Buffalo this week?
Yes, I do. Yep. It makes sense. I just, we mentioned last week, I can't pay $5K for a defense. So no to the Rams. Yeah. The Bills make a lot of sense. For cash games, I'm going to pay all the way down. And I think, the two that I'm most comfortable with would be Jaguars against Geno Smith, or you could play the football team against.
That's the one. That's the one for me. I think that Washington football team is the sneaky 2,100. I think that they came on a little bit last week. We mentioned the Green Bay game. Like that was their best game. They only allowed, it's the first game allowed under 365 yards. We talked about how Bridgewater gets his defense, but Washington has 8 sacks last 2 weeks. They forced 6 turnovers. Denver's allowed multiple sacks in every game this year and 5 on 2 different occasions. Denver had turned the ball over 4 times 2 weeks ago against the Raiders. I think we might finally see a week where Washington football team is the defense to play.
Yeah, totally agree. Everything you said, they have a really talented defensive line too. Like you said, yeah, I mean, nothing to add really. 2,100. It's a good spot for Washington.
I'm usually a little less like go super cheap D that you are, but I think this is a week like they actually are talented. I know they've been terrible, but they have the talent. They can get some sacks. Bridgewater loves to get sacked. I think that 2,100, like it's hard for me to get away from that. I think it's Buffalo or them. Cincinnati's kind of in the mix. They sacked their 3,600 at the Jets. Anytime you're going to go against Mike White, I think is what you said his name was. That's got to be a good game script there. They're going to have to get ahead. The Jets had 3 turnovers and allowed 2 sacks last week. Cincy sacked Lamar 5 times, which is impressive against Lamar. I can see Cincy, but like it's just 3,600. You're kind of getting up there with price a little bit. I'd probably go Buffalo instead.
Right. Yeah, but that's a good call. Any defense against Mike White is in play automatically.
Sentences we didn't expect ourselves to say a week ago when we didn't know who Mike White was. But
I see a question here for you, Scott. 49ers, Steelers, Bears, or Vikings for defense. Some Brandon asked this question.
Yeah, there must be a season-long question because the Vikings aren't on the slate.
Yeah.
God, that's hard. I'd probably just go with the 49ers and hope that Justin Fields makes a couple of mistakes and Bosa gets to him. The D has not been good, but it's all back end. Like their front 7 still rates out really well. Fred Warner's great. I'm hoping that Al-Shaair plays. He had a concussion last week, but he had the interception / fumble from Wentz last week. If Bosa and D Ford and Armstead can get home a little bit, I think they can make some chaos for Justin Fields. I'd probably go there. I just don't like. With Pittsburgh, the defense is good, but I don't like going against the Browns because they run the ball so much, and you want a little more action there. You want Baker to have to throw the ball. I don't like Pittsburgh to get up enough where maybe Baker has to throw the ball 40 times. So I'd probably go Niners if I had to of that group. But DFS wise, give me Buffalo, then Cincy at the same price range. But I'm going down to Washington and playing them on a bunch of teams.
Yep, I agree. And also, yeah, definitely give me the 49ers out of those 4 teams. Huge mismatch in the trenches for that game. Fields is going to have trouble with Bosa and company. He's already had trouble against basically anyone he plays. So, yeah. 49ers.
Yeah, someone else asked if they had to pick between Denver and Carolina defense. I'd probably go Denver and hope Tyler Heineke makes some mistakes, but I kind of like their rushing the quarterback. I don't love Carolina this week, so I'd probably go Denver.
Need to.
But cool. Anybody else you want to talk about? Anybody else on your mind? I think we hit all the ranges, all the prices, all the players, all the games. Is there anything that we missed that you want to hit real quick?
No, I think we covered a lot.
Beautiful. If you want to follow Ryan, his Twitter name is on the screen, but it's Ryan. His last name is Belongia. I am at Scott Jenstad. Jenstad is Jenstad. I can spell my own last name most times. That's good. We thank WinBet for their sponsorship on all the RotoWire podcasts this season. Other than that, hope everybody has a really good week 8. We'll be on Twitter if you want to ask any questions as injuries come out, news breaks. Inevitably, as happens with Friday morning podcast, someone's going to be ruled out in the next hour that we talked about liking. But if you have any questions, any of that, hit us up on Twitter. Please rate or review the podcast if you can. Also, other than that, we'll be back at you for week 9. Hope everybody has a fantastic week 8. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.